and do the sermon. And I wrote him back and said, no, because I don't do sermons. I'll leave that up to the theologians and the teachers. He says, well, what could you do? I said, well, I can tell stories. I'll do an extended children's story. And he says, okay, you can do that. I said, well, okay. So I was going to tell you some experiences and stories. I was going to talk to you about tithing. But then after this week's lesson on witnessing and hearing Doug Batchelor last night do his lesson on witnessing, I kind of changed my thinking a little bit on the tithing thing, and I said, well, I'm going to tell some stories about faith and Jesus and love, because witnessing, I grew up as an Adventist, and we used to call it sharing our faith. And I always felt I had a fairly strong sense of faith. Even as a little child, I would pray. I remember praying when I was 4 years old that I'd lost a sock. And I would pray, Jesus, help me find this sock. And I would find it. And so I developed this attitude and this belief that if you had enough faith, Jesus could answer your prayers. Now, he doesn't always answer them dramatically, but I have a few stories. I've written a list here, and I don't think I'll get through the list because I want to end on time. But sharing our faith is really important, and that's what I think witnessing is. And so God can use us no matter how much we know, no matter how much grounded our conviction is and our conversion. You can be a new Christian, you can be a born-again Christian, you can be a Adventist growing up in the church Christian, but you can always share with somebody your faith and witness. And you don't have to be out there necessarily giving Bible studies and preaching to people. So when I was kind of ADD. I always had a million things running through my mind all the time, and I never really could stick to anything very long. So I've had a number of careers. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've done all kinds of stuff, and I meet a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people, and I enjoy sharing and talking to almost anybody. Well, really anybody that'll listen. Some people probably get tired of listening, and then they see me and they run. But I started back in high school and college. I was very small for my age. I was the shortest kid in my whole high school in Sacramento. And when I graduated from 8th grade, my mom is 5 feet tall. And in 8th grade, I came up to her shoulder when I went to high school. So I was about 4'6" or 5 or something like that. So I was always the smallest. I got bullied a lot. I didn't like school at all. I left my senior year of high school. I decided for one of the costume parties, I decided to build a pair of stilts that I could wear under a long-legged pant and be closer to 7 feet tall. And I went to the costume party, and of course nobody knew who I was because I bought a cheapy old Frankenstein mask, and I was Frankenstein at the costume party, and nobody knew who I was. And it went over so well with me that I thought, wow, this gives me some kind of control and more. This was great being bigger than everybody else. I turned that into a job. And back in 1970, minimum wage was 85 cents an hour. I worked at the school to help pay for school. But I bought myself a full head Frankenstein monster mask from Disneyland. I had a friend that was going to Disneyland buy it for $50. That was a lot of money. And I built some better stilts, and I built my costume, and I put feet on these stilts, and I hired myself out for $25 for 20 minutes. And I started getting a lot of jobs. So I made myself a job in college. And I'm saying this because God can use us in ways that seem a little weird, and I wouldn't do it today. But here I was, a monster, scaring people. And how do I witness as a monster? I had a guy that ran one of the big motels in Sacramento, Wood Lake Inn. He saw me one time in the newspaper because they printed up stories about me in the newspaper all the time. Every place I went, somebody had I had one guy that always put an article in the newspaper. He called me and he says, Glenn, can you come down to my hotel and come in the lounge and scare everybody? I said, okay. So I went down there, I scared everybody. A few weeks later, he called me and he says, Glenn, I think you need a big coffin. So I'm having my carpenter build you a big coffin, and I'm having a commercial artist paint it, and I'm having my coffin company put a liner in it. And I want you to go to the Rotary Club meeting in Sacramento, the big convention. And I want my guys to carry you in there and stand up the coffin. And I want you to break out of the coffin and scare everybody. I says, okay, I can do that. And of course he pays me. The guys could hardly carry it in because these old guys couldn't carry this big old coffin. So now I was close to 8 feet tall in this costume. And I scared everybody, and I had men, grown men, crawling over banquet tables to get away from me. And he had just a great time. So he gave me the coffin, and he'd call me every now and then and say, Glenn, my friend Evel Knievel's coming to the lounge tonight. Can you come over and scare him? I said, okay, come over and scare Evel Knievel. Got some pictures with Evel Knievel. And this just kind of went on, month after month, year after year, a couple of years. We had a Bible worker in our Carmichael church, and she made an effort to put Adventist literature in all the hotel rooms. And she went to his hotel, and she tried to get our literature in the hotel rooms, and he told her, I don't even put Gideon Bibles in my rooms. I do not want any religious material in my rooms at all. And then he asked her, where did you say you were from? She says, Carmichael Seventh-day Adventist Church. He said, do you know Glen Sawyer? And she said, yeah, he's one of our college students. He says, oh, well, if that's where Glen goes to church, you can put your literature in our rooms. Because Glen is doing his missionary work as a monster. Because he's scaring the hell out of everybody. So he let her put the missionary stuff in there. So God can use us even when we may be doing something that I wouldn't even suggest doing anymore, but at the time it seemed like a good job. I had another experience, a big realty company in Sacramento, big development, called me up. They said, we want you to come to the opening of our big development to promote this development. And I said, okay. They said, well, how much do you charge? We want you for an hour. I said, well, okay, I'd do it for $100 or whatever. I can't even remember the price. I said, when is it? Well, it's on Saturday, such and such a day. I said, well, I can't do it. Why? I said, because Saturday's the Sabbath, and I keep the Sabbath from Friday night sundown till Saturday night sundown. And the lady says, well, instead of $100, we'll pay you $500 for an hour. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. She says, you can't do it for an hour? Get restitution from the priest or whatever? You can't do something? I said, no, I'm not going to compromise my beliefs to work on Sabbath. She said, okay, well, they told me I could go up to $1,000 for an hour. Back then, at 85 cents an hour, that's pretty big money. So I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And she said, well, I don't have authorization yet, but we'll go up to $5,000 for an hour. Would you do it for that? And then you can just ask forgiveness. I says, I can't do it. She says, I don't know anybody that would stick to their convictions like that. So even being a monster, you can share your faith. So as I thought about this witnessing and love and how you talk to people and who you meet, I meet a lot of non-Adventists because I've been in a lot of different jobs. I worked for the church for a while. I've had my own business. I'm a nurse. I'm a travel agent. I help people with taxes. I do all kinds of stuff. And I get to meet a lot of non-Adventists. And as I meet with them, I get to tell them stories. And I don't tell them about the monster stories because non-Adventists, I don't want to get them thinking I want to be a monster. But I went to Union College to work at the press there years ago in 1980. And Union College had a theology program, and they probably still do. But I was production manager at the printing press, and we worked a night shift, and some of the students worked for us. And I had one guy working a night shift, running a folder, and I went in early in the morning, and he should have been already gone. But he was in the press, and he was walking around frantic, just all upset, and I'm going, what's the matter? He's going, I have an appointment in half an hour, and I cannot find my car keys, and I drove here. I cannot find my car keys. And I said, well, where have you looked? He says, I've looked in the bathroom, in the locker room, around the press, around the folder. I've looked everywhere. Now, he's a theology student. And I said to him, I said, well, have you prayed about it? He said, no. And it's like, really? You're a theology student. I said, let's pray. So we bowed our heads. I said a really short prayer. I said, Jesus, I know that you're concerned about our lives, and this seems like an insignificant little part of somebody's life, but this is a really big appointment for him. He needs to get there, and we can't get him there without his car keys. We know you know right where those keys are. Can you just show us where to look? Now, I'd already asked him where he looked. When we got done with the prayer, I said, and I don't remember his name. It's been so many years ago, and I'm getting forgetful. I said, okay, let's let God lead. Let's go look. And I immediately went to the bathroom, the restroom. He says, I've already searched the restroom. I said, well, I just feel like I'm just going in there to look. I walked in. There's a shelf right by the sink. His car keys are sitting right on top of that shelf in plain sight. I walked in, picked up his keys, turned around and said, are these them? And he goes, those weren't there. I had searched that restroom 10 times. How did that happen? I says, you're a theology student. Now you've got a story to tell about prayer, faith, and how God cares about us. So you can witness to theology students. You can witness to non-Christians. So my dad had a business partner. He was having some kind of party at his house. I went over there. During the party, he says, oh, I need to go take my car and do something, move it or do something. Guess what? Another set of lost keys. Now, this is a non-Christian, non-Adventist party. And he says, so we started looking. Everybody was looking for these car keys. And I didn't look very long. I just said, Bob, we need to pray about this. He says, well, I don't even believe in God. I said, well, I do, and God knows, and Jesus knows right where those car keys are. He says, okay. So I just had a short prayer with him. I said, Jesus, you know where these car keys are, just like the other ones? Now, this was years before the second one. This is backwards, but this goes years back when I was still Frankenstein. I said, you know right where those car keys are. Please show us where to look. And he says, okay. I got up. I walked out his front door. I went down his steps. There were some shoes sitting on the grass. I don't know why there were shoes sitting outside. I looked in the shoe, and the car keys were in that shoe. I picked them up. I mean, it happened within 10 seconds of prayer. Picked them up, and I said, are these them? He's going, I just can't believe God would answer that prayer that quick. Now, I felt like I was kind of putting God on test, because what if he didn't show me where these car keys are? But he did. And it's a great story to tell somebody. So if you don't have prayer stories that have been answered, hey, tell my story if you want to. But somebody needs to hear how God cares for even the little things in our lives, like finding car keys, finding a contact lens. I prayed for contact lens losses in my high school days and go out in the yard and find it in the grass almost immediately after prayer. So things like that just give you and help you develop a very strong faith that God answers prayer. And if you look up Hebrews 11:1, that's a text on faith, and I will pull it up here. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And that's also in Matthew 21:21. Jesus is talking to them about faith, and he says, if you have faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if ye shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. I haven't tried that. I'm not going to, because I don't think God wants me to move a mountain into the sea. But it gives us that thought and belief that God can actually do anything. The way I tell these stories to people is sometimes because they've lost things, sometimes they're ill, sometimes they're financially having trouble, and I tell them tithe stories. I tell them answers to prayer stories. I pray with them if they're sick. So stories, and Jesus told parables, and I don't get into a lot of doctrine and Bible study, but people will ask me after I've told them stories, they'll ask me questions about church and faith and Christianity, and then we get to talk about Sabbath and why we keep Sabbath, and you lead them down a trail into wanting to look at more religious things. And it's exciting to see people get an interest in God, and especially nowadays in where the world is going. Because I talk to guys now, and it's like, you see where the world is headed? This is end time events. Whether you believe in God or not, this is end time events. We need to be ready for Jesus to come back. And Jesus is the only way that we're going to get this fixed. We will never be the same as we were last year. Things are not going to go back to the same. I have a couple of more stories that I can tell you if you're willing to listen, and it's not quite 12 yet. I went to a backpacking trip when I was just out of high school. There were a group of high school students, college students now, and, well, this was several years after high school. We decided to go backpacking up at Tahoe to Half Moon Lake, which is in Desolation Wilderness. Now, if you've never been up to Tahoe in Desolation Wilderness, it is desolation. I mean, it's really way out in the woods. It's a high hike, quite a long hike. So we hiked in, backpacked in for 3 days, and we're going to stay there. We had quite a group. There was probably about 15 of us. I happened to be engaged at the time. So we went there, and we were camped by a lake. The next morning, 3 of us decided we wanted to go see what was on the other side of the mountain. And there was this mountain peak by the campsite, up through the woods. It was high enough elevation that even in summer you could see snow on the side of this mountain. And there was snow to get to the mountain. So we said, well, that peak there that has just rocks on top, let's go look over that peak and see what's on the other side, because there's just desolation. There's lakes and all kinds of stuff. So the 3 of us decided we're going to hike up to the top of that peak. So we hike up the first mountain, and at the top of that mountain, we thought we'd just go to the top. No, there's a big snowfield, and then there's the next mountain. So we walk through the snowfield, we get to the next mountain, we start going up the side of the mountain. You don't have to stay in the snow because the snow's kind of in patches. We start climbing, and there's one guy ahead of me, and then there's me, and then there's a guy behind me. And as we're climbing and scrambling up the rocks, it's getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And we get to the point of, I'm going, this is not really that much fun anymore, because I don't know how we're going to get down. It's hard enough going up, but going down's worse. I said, this is getting kind of, scary. But we kept going. We thought, well, if we get to the top, we'll find a different way down. As we're going up, and this story has 3 miracles in it, we're on the rocky part of this cliff, and we're rock climbing up. And there's a guy below me about 20 feet, and then there's a guy above me about 20 feet, and we're just kind of climbing up. Near the top, I grab a big rock to pull myself up, and this rock's about this big. I grab it, and that whole rock comes loose. And all of a sudden, it is going down the side of the mountain, and I turned, and there's the guy 20 feet below me, right in line with this rock. And I didn't even have time hardly to yell. I turned around, that rock's going down. It hit a rock right in front of his head and bounced over him and didn't take him off the side of that mountain. I think it probably would have killed him. And we're like, oh my goodness, what a protecting, guarding angel we had, because that would have been absolute terrible, because we were 5 hours away from hiking out to any kind of civilization. We finally scrambled up to the top of this mountain, and it's like, okay, how are we going to get out of this? We could look way down to the camp. You could hardly see the people. We could look way down there, and the other side was just total desolation, all kinds of pretty lakes and everything. And the one guy that was the biggest, tallest guy, I was still short, but he was tall. He says, right over here, the snow comes clear up to the top of the mountain, and it slopes all the way down. It had melted about this far away from the mountain, you know, as the snow melts, it melts away from the mountain, but the snow's still there. He says, I'm going to try to get out on that snow. And I'm going, this doesn't look like a good idea to me. But he got out on there, and he started down that slope, digging his heels in. And he got down the slope about 25 feet. And I said, well, that's better than going down the rock cliff. So I kind of jumped out there. I start going down the slope with my heels. The problem is, when I started going down, the snow started going down. And it started this little avalanche going down, and I had no control, and I was flying down the mountain, and I was within arm's length of him, so I went right past. He tried to reach out and grab me. I'm going, good luck with that. I go flying down the mountain, so I slide, I don't know, it's got to be 300 feet or so down this mountain, 500 feet. It was quite a ride. It was like tobogganing. I'm going, wow, I'm going down this mountain. And I'm thinking, I hope I can stop someplace. And as I'm going down, here's this big rock sticking up right in front of me, and a little scrawny bristle pine tree next to it. And there's nothing I can do. I hit my feet against that rock. It throws me over the rock, and I land behind the rock in the snow. And it stops me. That's enough to stop me. The snow kept going by, and it stopped. You could look up, and you could see where the snow came down. And I landed on my arm, and I thought I broke my arm. And so the guys that I passed, he worked his way down where the snow wasn't sliding, and he finally got to me. The other guy decided, I ain't doing that. He went clear around and came across, and one of the guys had a big hunting knife. They cut a limb off of that little pine tree. We put it on my arm, wrapped some straps around it to hold my arm. I thought for sure it was broken. We said, man, that was way too exciting. So we decided, well, we got to hike down. We went down to see where to go. Where I landed, no more than 15 feet past that, went over a 150-foot cliff. If I hadn't hit that rock, I would have gone off that cliff. So that was a second miracle. It was like God saved our lives twice today. And it was like, oh, man, I'm glad God's taking care of us. So we finally work our way around the other side of the mountain. We get down. We get to camp. And my fiance's down there, which is not my wife. We never did get married. But anyway, she promised me, she made me promise that I would never do something that stupid again, and that I wouldn't go up that mountain. And I said, okay, I promise, I'll never go up that mountain. No sooner that I'd said that. Now, did anybody grow up Adventist? Okay. Those of you that didn't grow up Adventist, when you get engaged, what do? You give your fiance a ring. Well, growing up Adventist, we didn't do that. We gave each other watches. So I had a watch that she had given me, and she was wearing a watch that I'd given her. And no sooner that I promised I wouldn't go back up there, I looked, that watch was gone. It was on that arm I thought was broken. I was so worried about the pain, I didn't think about the watch. And I told her, I said, the watch is gone. I'm going back up there and get it. And she says, no, you promised. I said, you know what, I promised, but no, I'm going back up that mountain to get that watch. She said, oh my goodness, she was not happy. The one guy that had the big hunting knife, he says, I'll go with you. I says, okay, let's go. So the next morning, we get up, we hike up the first mountain, we have to go across the snowfield and hike up the second mountain. the group of college students, they decided they're going to watch this time, because even from camp you could see where the snow slid down the mountain. They said, well, we're going to go up there and watch. So they went up to the snowfield and they sat there, and we went up back where above the cliff. And I get above the cliff with the guy, and I tell him, I said, you know what? Jesus knows right where that watch is, because there's no way we're going to find it. All that snow came down, and it's not sitting on top of the snow. I flew through the air to land behind the rock. That watch has got to be buried in the snow someplace. So I'm sitting there where I landed, and the guy says, well, here's my hunting knife, big old blade on it. I says, Jesus knows right where that watch is. I took that hunting knife and I swiped it in the snow beside me. I took one big swipe. I took another big swipe, and that deep under the snow, the watch band was flat, broke the watch band apart. The edge of the watch band just showed, didn't even touch the knife, but you could see the edge of the watch band right there in the snow. I grabbed that watch and I waved to the way down there. I couldn't hardly see him, but way down the mountain, I waved. We got the watch, we went around the way we went down before, got down there, and they said, did you find the watch? I said, yeah, I waved to you guys. They said, we just finished praying that you would find that watch when you waved. I said, well, that's when I found it. And so all those students, they were all basically Adventist. All those students now had an experience of now the third miracle in the story. 2 saving our lives, and the third one finding a watch. And it gives you something to tell people, and it gives you an experience where God cares about us and loves us so much. He cares about an insignificant little watch buried in the snow, and show you right where it is, and you don't even hit it with the knife, and you find it that quick. I mean, it could have been any place in that snow. And so it just kept building my faith that God cares about everything we do. And I've got 4 more stories, but I'm out of time. So if you want to hear more stories, huh?
You'll have to come back another Sabbath.
Yeah, well, maybe sometime I could. I've got some other good, just excellent answers to immediate answers to prayer. And it just builds your faith more and more, and it gives you confidence to tell people God cares about them and loves them. And it could lead them to wanting to have a relationship with God. Now, I don't know if these people that I talk to will ever be Adventists, if they will ever really believe in God, or if it helps them develop a relationship with Jesus and start reading the Bible or studying and feel like, hey, if God can do that for Glen, maybe God can help me. Maybe God loves us that much that I should pay attention. And I really feel strongly that the witnessing we do, the sharing of our faith, is the step that might get somebody interested in God. And the theologians and the preachers and the Bible workers and the teachers can study with them more than I would, because I'm a storyteller and I have a hard time sitting still long enough to study. But might lead them into a relationship with Jesus that is personal instead of just driven by doctrine. And sometimes when I was growing up as an Adventist kid, the last thing I wanted to hear was Ellen G. White said something. I just didn't want to hear any of that. I just, all the doctrine stuff, even though I believed all the doctrine stuff, doctrine can overwhelm somebody sometimes and not give them that personal relationship with Jesus that I feel like leads us into doctrine and Ten Commandments and Sabbath and tithing and all the rest of the stuff that we believe. So I'll just leave you with that. And one of these days, maybe if you want to hear one more story, I can tell you personally or I can tell you here. But I can tend to talk too much. So I'm going to stop. And I'm going to have prayer, and then we'll be able to leave. Our Father in heaven, I want to thank you for all the times that you've protected us and you've cared for us. You love us so much. Even the most insignificant little things in our lives, you can help us with. The major things in our lives that we don't even know that you've helped us with. You've taken care of us. You've blessed us. Please give us the kind of faith that we need to share with others and to bring others into a relationship with you. We love you. We want to do what you want us to do. We know we need to witness. This gives us a way to witness and a way to share. And that, to me, brings us closer to you so that we can help other people see the same love that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.